It's a Fun Hour Daily. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon. The first 2 days of India traveling to the West Indies for their long trip, their long journey. They're playing 3 Test matches and they're playing 8 white ball internationals. The first of those Test matches is at Windsor Park in Dominica, a ground close to my heart, which is something we spoke about on the weekly show a few days ago. But Jeff, you're going to sum up the first 2 days of action at Dominica in the space of 30 seconds.
That actually might not be too hard. West Indies were not very good. Batted first, made 150. Alec Athanase, we talked about him in the weekly show, and how it was exciting to have a local player at Dominica. He made 47. Nobody else did much. Ashwin took 5 for 60. Jadeja took 3, so 8 between them. And India piling them on their, 312 for 2. They're going to win this by a mile. But I suppose it's a weird kind of setup for us doing. We're doing a daily show about this series that we're not going to be able to do other ones on because we're so busy with everything else. But it seemed notable enough from what we saw across the first couple of days. Yashasvi Jaiswal making a ton on debut, Ashwin back into the side for a 5 for uniform chat, which we'll come to later in the show. These are all things that interest us, and there needed to be some final word representation on this Test series.
That's right. There's enough going on there in Dominica to warrant our attention, even if it's not for a daily every day. That's why we're doing it at Stumps Day 2. But yeah, 3, 1, 2 for 2. There was far more action on the first day, I think, is where I'll focus my attention on, where the Windies were dismissed for 150 in the 65th over, rather. You mentioned Ashwin completing yet another 5-wicket bag, 5 for 60 from 24 and a half overs. He got moving early on with an extraordinary delivery to Chanderpaul with the new ball. It was a bit of a reminder to me. And of course, he does what he always does, going through the lower order, picking up Joseph and Athanase and Warrican. There's a story about the Warrican, the man the authorities came to blame, that really strikes me is what a missed opportunity the World Test Championship final was. There's always talk about whether there's sufficient space for Ashwin in an Indian Test side in the senior countries. Well, he always shows with the new ball, as far as I'm concerned, with the new ball that he's just as damaging. So it's not a case of needing the ball to get old and the conditions, the surface to deteriorate to bring Ashwin into play. He's always in the game because he's the most skillful spinner that maybe we've ever seen.
And yeah, I mean, potentially if you're looking at finger spin, especially like the precision, the way he just chisels away. And yeah, spinning conditions in Dominica, but there were reasonable spinning conditions at the Oval as well as that match wore on. There were a number of times where we thought, that would be extremely usful for India to be able to turn to him as that game got deeper. And obviously they didn't have the option. They don't have the confidence to go in with 3 quicks, Ashwin as the premier spinner, and then have Jadeja as the all-rounder, which would seem like the way to go. It's worked here. The way he's set up early in the innings when he had Ravichandran Ashwin, who's been super impressive in his short career so far, left-hander moving across the stumps, not in the exaggerated sort of fashion that his father used to employ, but he kept coming across, and Ashwin kept bowling. So like watching through that first spell, just how skillful the setup is. He's bowling around the wicket, and he keeps just bowling the one that goes pretty much straight on, meeting the middle of the bat about, 15, 20 times, and then he bowls one that just turns a little bit, just enough. And it's enough to sneak past the outside edge and hit off stump. I mean, the level of precision to be able to do that, and to be able to do it early in an innings to a really good defensive player who's beaten on the outside edge and bowled from around the wicket, just extraordinary.
It's drift. That's the thing that spinners like Ashwin can generate, and he's always had the ability to get the ball to move, I guess, counter-cyclically, like you're trying to get the ball to break off the seam, off the rudder of the ball, but he can do it off both the shiny side, but drifting in is, it gives a sense of how much work he's getting on it early on too. So that was the early breakthrough. And then Shardul Thakur strikes with his third ball. Shardul is another man with a golden arm of sorts. It seems like whenever he's thrown the ball, he's in the action. He delivered Ishan Kishan's first catch in Test cricket. I think that's noteworthy too, that Ishan Kishan had to move forward and go low. And I mean, it was regulation to an extent. Had he dropped it, certainly would have felt regulation. But you got to get to the contest. And Ishan Kishan, look, he's obviously the beneficiary of a spot that's came up that otherwise wouldn't have been the case. Rishabh Pant was set and forget for a decade. And it's a a very sad set of circumstances that sees Rishabh out of the side at the moment. I understand why KS Bharat got opportunities in India. And look, it's a slow and low and fairly turgid surface there at Rishabh. But nevertheless, Kishan taking two good catches, one off Jadeja as well, a back cut that did deviate. He moved the gloves and took it softly. That shows that any suggestion that he's a batter who wears the gloves occasionally isn't fair to him, that he's a better wicketkeeper, and it will give India that option to have a more aggressive player inside their top 6 or 7, depending on where they use him into the future, in favour of KS Bharat, if they see that configuration working.
Maybe half a decade for Rishabh. He's only about 25, so if he played the full decade, he might have that might have been
I reckon it's reasonable. I reckon it would have been reasonable to think that from when his Test career started that he'd be a 10-year prospect. But
right, that you thought he would be for a decade. Yeah, I mean, I thought you were saying that he debuted at 15, which was confusing for a minute. Okay, gotcha. We're on the same page now, and should have been, and like hopefully will be able to come back. But when you're talking about those prodigies, Yashasvi Jaiswal, he's been, I mean, he's been the next big thing for a while. Dominated at the Under-19s World Cup. He was dominating for Mumbai at the age of 17, 18, particularly in the 50-over stuff, and then shredding it through the IPL this year. And it's interesting when a player, say, hits a 13-ball half-century in the IPL, and you're like, this guy has to open the batting in the Test team. But it's worked. I mean, he had patches of being aggressive, but he's got temperament. He can bat long. I mean, he's still out there. He might be making 300 on debut when they resume, which will probably be before this show goes out. 115th Test ton on debut in the men's game. 13 women have done it as well. And I think he's the 13th for India to do it. It's interesting, right? We've seen a bunch of openers start with a bang for India recently. Prithvi Shaw, Shubman Gill, and now Jaiswal. Gill's still in this team, but has moved down to 3. Prithvi Shaw's sort of persona non grata anymore for whatever reason that is, fitness or fielding or whatever else you can put it down to. It's interesting how you can have these terrific players who have these great early moments that don't always translate to a long career. So in some ways I'm nervous for him, seeing him make 100 on debut, because I wonder if, in 18 months' time, are you another one who's pushed out of the side for whatever reason? In
that sequence is Mark Agarwal, who made a couple of double tons early in his career and could never really bed down the spot despite seemingly having the technique for it. And look, Jaiswal, it's the first time I've seen him bat against the red ball, but he's tall, he's organised, he plays late under his eyes. I mean, these are all good qualities for a modern Test opener. Also got the big bag of tricks. I mean, Warwick in his first over, was it like 2 overs before stumps that he was reverse sweeping him? That's an unusual thing to do. That's the white ball game, the best of the white ball game, putting pressure on the fielding team. Being taken into red ball cricket. And look, he did bat all day on day 2 and only added a further 103 runs. You would have thought after such a great start, galloping to 40 by the close on evening one. I think they were 80 without loss after 23. Day 2 was a far more pedestrian affair where so many bowlers were used. And I suppose I know, having watched him in the IPL, he's got the game to take down your 6th and 7th change bowlers, Raymond Reifer and Jermaine Blackwood and so on. But it's as though he made a decision that he was checking in for bed and breakfast and going to bat across at least 3 days. And I think you're right, because they showed no real purpose in the last couple of hours of play when I thought they might turn up the volume a little bit yesterday. They were happy to bat at a very pedestrian run rate, which suggests that they want to bat once and bat gigantically. And that might mean that, 200, even 300 could be on the agenda if you can bat for the entirety of day 3 as well.
This is the interesting part, right? Once you've bowled out a team so cheaply and so quickly on day 1, well, the game's yours. You've got 4.5 days left to do with what you will. And so, they can bat for as long as they want. So Rohit Sharma made another 100 away from home, something that's become a specialty for him. A small 100 was dismissed just after he reached the milestone. I'm sure Kohli's got his eyes set on one, but batting at a very gentle rate for 36.
It's interesting as well. Like, I just thought after tea, you go through 9 bowlers have set down overs for the Windies. The only man not to bowl is Joshua De Silva, the wicketkeeper. And he has bowled at Test level as well. De Silva bowls absolute filthy. Bowled in. I think he bowled against England last year. He took the pads off at one stage or another. So, when you're using that many bowlers, I thought that Kohli is one of the greats of his generation. would just look to monster them after tea. But it was a nod to what they're trying to do here. Wear out the Windies, remembering it's back-to-back test matches. If they can get loads of overs into the legs of Roach and Joseph, and even Rakeem Cornwall, he bowled only 11 overs so far, 11 tidy overs out of 113, but that seems a little bit odd to me. Warwick did the bulk of the spinning work, bowling 34 of them. But if they can, not just make a lot of runs, but keep the Windies out there for a long time, they'll get their reward in tests 2 and 3 through the rest of this series. But yeah, Kohli, just one boundary in 96 deliveries. I doubt Virat Kohli has ever played an innings in his life where he's hit 1-4 in 96 balls. I remember towards the end of Tendulkar's career, he would receive criticism of stat padding and so on. I'm not saying Kohli is doing that, but if you wanted to be uncharitable, you could say that Kohli sized up very early on. This is 100, a lock for 100, so long as I can bat with discipline and go the whole way through. And I've got almost no doubt that Kohli, once reset on morning 3, will advance to 50 and onto 100 as well. And now that he's kind of gotten through that tough part of his career when hundreds weren't coming at all for him, that I reckon he might be on the cusp of moving into another one of those purple patches like we saw between sort of roughly 2014 and 2019 when he couldn't stop making tons.
Well, if he can't make one from 312 for 2, then maybe it's time to look at how things are going with your game, I suppose. Yeah, I want to come back to Ashwin. So after that first magic delivery, then it's just a matter of flight, and he just keeps teasing them with flight, and gets. I mean, Craig Brathwaite is all about batting long. He plays across the line, chips one up in the air. He's trying to be a bit aggressive, put pressure back on. And then the ball to Athanase is like speared through and much quicker. So you see those variations that Ashwin's able to use. So he gets Alzari Joseph in pretty much the same way as he gets Brathwaite, and that's the much faster one that gets Athanase, and then he ends up getting the little edge to short leg where Shubman Gill isn't even sure that he's caught the catch, which is Hall of Fame worthy in its own way. He dives forward for the catch, then he tells the umpire it's hit the ground, pats the ground. Umpires have a look on the replay anyway, and they conclude that he's actually got his hand under it and it's okay. I mean, that's an interesting decision-making process for me.
And just to go back to Athanase, who you mentioned before, I mean, the fact that he's made 47 on test debut, faced the 99 deliveries, hit 6 boundaries and a 6, but I mean, he cut really well. He seemed to have that shot across the line with Ashwin down pat from the get-go. That takes some eye. We already know he's got a very quick one-day 50. I think on debut, he made a 22 baller or something like that. The fact that he's from Dominica, the Wimbledon and the Leeward Islands are underrepresented in modern West Indies cricket, and it is a problem. Remembering that part of the Caribbean was so important to their success in the glory days. I mean, the 4 Knights of Antigua and so on. I know they're in a different part of the Caribbean to Dominica there, but nevertheless, it is significant. When I was there in 2015, there were protests at Dominica because of the lack of local representation. I've got a T-shirt somewhere upstairs from decrying the fact that the selectors had it in against them. So getting picked at home on test debut, making 47, looking a classy operator, being a left-hander, they always look prettier for some reason. So that's not for nothing. So he didn't go on with the start. He was eventually out to Ashwin, one of the multiple wickets that Ashwin took either side of tee. But I think that's just a marker that he's laid. And hopefully across 3 test matches, he can really get into the series and be a player for the future, because unfortunately this West Indies side does look like more or less the same side that it's turned out for years for increasingly diminishing returns.
And he had a little bit of the white ball approach to test batting as well in him, the way that he took on the spinners and so on there. So big runs ahead, it looks like, for India once they resume. Hall of Fame, we might have to come to the kits now. Adidas, Adidas, depending how which hip hop you grow up listening to, sponsored the Indian team pretty recently. They've been pushing for visibility. They've been making sure they get photos posted on socials and so on with all the players wearing the Adidas badge. Doug Bollinger could kiss it if he wanted to on the shirts. They've got into the playing kit. Now, I've got to say this is controversial. I've seen a lot of opposition, a lot of criticism of it. At a glance, I didn't mind it. Like they've got the they've the very archetypal Adidas stripes, the three stripes down the shoulder and then the three stripes down the leg. The ones on the trousers don't look so crash hot. I don't necessarily mind the ones on the shoulder. They have a slightly airline pilot epaulette sort of style to it. But it is interesting that in like, what's the exact wording about how white a pair of whites needs to be when it comes to the ICC and it comes to Test cricket?
You can be as cynical as you want with this. I'll try and keep my bat and pad close together on this one and simply say that it's lucky that India trying to get away with this and not another Test playing nation, because it looks ridiculous on the trousers. Shirt, I think I agree with you. Shirt's more or less fine. Shirt's been an advertising billboard for years, right? And I hate that too. I hate the fact that since COVID, you can have advertising on the front of the shirt. But, you know, the shirts themselves have lost their sanctity long ago. The trousers is all we've had left. maybe the jumpers when you got the cable knits, but the last thing left without advertisements all over it were the trousers. And yeah, I don't like the three stripes running down. That's nothing to do with Adidas. It's more to do with the sartorial expectations for Test cricketers. And look, I'm sure they're making loads of money out of it. The Indian cricketers are great billboards in terms of the brands they represent, and good luck to them for it. But yeah, that jarred with me. I can't believe they've gotten away with this. I'm interested to see what precedent it sets, because yes, as I said before, India going first probably means that other nations will follow in a similar way and try and use the space on the thighs as a place to advertise. And that's effectively what it is, right? I know it's apparel, but it's effectively an advertisement for Adidas. So will we see, it's a Puma line, isn't it? Is it a line, or I meant it to be the Puma, right? It's a Puma. It is a Puma. Of course it is. I never thought of that before. We'll see. How did I not think of that before? The Puma will end up being, I'm sure, whichever country's got that as their kit apparel sponsor, will be all over the thigh next, and so it will go. So yeah, not thrilled to see that. It's a signifier of, shall we say, the direction of travel.
If you are going to go all in on the trousers, at least take the stripes all the way to the ankle. I'm not sure why they're stopping three-quarters of the way
well,
down.
I had them. I'm sure you did too, Jeff. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I had the Adidas three stripe. Always black, weren't they? The black with.
But didn't the stripes go all the way down?
Yeah. My word. Yeah, that was part of the sort of iconic late 90s, early 2000s image of the black trackies, effectively, with the three stripes going all the way to the ankles.
And they would have, sometimes you could get the press stud ones down the sides so that you could whip them off without, like full Monty style, without taking, without having to get them over your shoes and all the rest of it. So maybe if the whites could do that, maybe if Yashasvi Jaiswal's double hundred celebration is just whipping the strides off and whipping them around his head.
Well, I can see that. I mean, it might be a quicker way of getting changed and putting your protection on as well. Whip the strides off and put your box and your thigh pads on and all the rest of it. So there might be practical benefits to this, but yeah, I'm not keen on blue being all over the whites.
Hey, yeah, all right. Well, India full Monty could happen. It could. Maybe there's a Monty Panesar crossover. Isn't that the best bit of his Mastermind appearance when they ask him about what's the name of a movie about a group of coal miners who have to do an erotic review, and he couldn't think of it.
Well, he said Dream Boys. That's why I said Dream Boys before. He said full Monty. Yeah. So he thought it was, yes. Well, we were meant to be playing. This is a one for those that care what Jeff and I do after hours. We were meant to be playing a game against Monty Panesar today for the Lord's Taverners, but it's been rained out, which has given us the space to record this video. So thank you to the British weather, the London weather, but we missed the chance to hit Monty for six, to go the full Monty on Monty and be a couple of Dream Boys.
We could have, we would have, we should have, but some dreams are best left in your sleep. All right. That's enough of that. This has been the final word, random daily about the West Indies India series. We'll see what else happens across those next couple of test matches. The second one of which is in the middle of the Ashes test at Manchester. So good luck to us, but we'll try to keep an eye on things in the Caribbean as well. Jeff Lemon, Adam Collins. We'll see you next time.
Rally.